Hey guys, welcome back to Margot Watches Movies. My name is Jake Margot. Tonight I'm going to be reviewing The Running Man, the new film from director-writer Edgar Wright, starring Glenn Powell, Michael Cera, Domingo Colman, William H. Macy, and Josh Brolin. I'm going to structure this review to where I start off with non-spoilers. I'll get into what I liked about the film, what I didn't, and then I'll get into a more extensive spoiler section in the back half. There'll be a timestamp below. If you've seen the movie, you want to jump to the spoilers right away, just find that below. So let's start off with a synopsis. This film is essentially, in a lot of ways, like the Hunger Games with a slightly different concept. Glenn Powell lives in a dystopian, corporate-run world where the wealth is very much distributed to a very small populace of people, while the vast majority are left to fend for themselves, working horrible jobs, struggling to keep their children from being sick. And Glenn Powell's motivation in this film is having to try and join any contest, not just the Running Man, to try and make enough money to feed and keep his family sick-free and safe. I think overall, let's start with the good. The world building in this film is absolutely fantastic. The front half of this movie, the first hour, is just wonderful immersion into this crazy world that Edgar Wright created. And I'm aware it's an adaptation of a Stephen King novel. There was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but the world that Edgar Wright displays to us, both visually with his patented, super creative shots and transitions, and really layering it with the motivation for why Glenn Powell is in a contest where you have 30 days to survive to win $1 billion while the entire country is trying to kill you. And between the shots of this cement-laden, rundown city where everyone is fending for themselves and the excess of the very few wealthy to the corporatized and propagandist way that the shows are run, it fires on all cylinders. In many ways, it reminds me of the first Hunger Games film. I think this is a much better directed movie than the first Hunger Games, which was way too much handheld choppiness. But it's very much from the same playbook, where you get this extended intro, the pageantry, and the flair of joining the contest, showing potential allies, laying who the enemies will be, the stakes. All of that is so resoundingly well done. And this is a movie I was highly anticipating, I want to add. One of my top 10 most anticipated films of the year. Edgar Wright has an amazing track record. He's made some all-time classics. One of my favorite, action comedies, kind of riffing on the buddy cop formula, Hot Fuzz, of course, Shaun of the Dead, Baby Driver. So my expectations were to love this movie. And I'm going to stick to the positives for now, but I did not love this movie. Another positive of this film is Glenn Powell himself, the charismatic lead, absolutely delivers the goods and showcases why he's such a rising superstar in the industry. He has the charisma, he has the humor, and working and collaborating with Tom Cruise on Top Gun Maverick, he learned all the right notes of an action star, where he willingly throws himself into these stunts, making sure and Edgar Wright, between the two of them, are making sure you're seeing his face in all of these awesome action set pieces and stunts that he's doing. He devotes himself and commits himself to the role. He certainly looks the part. And I just think he carries the film on his back for the entire runtime. It's a great lead performance in this type of movie. He's hitting on all cylinders, and he covers a lot of different facets. He has this boiling, simmering rage about his character that's utilized in both comedic and dramatic moments. I think Josh Brolin is a good enough villain in the film, where he brings charisma and campiness in I think in a good way that fits the the style and the storytelling that Edgar Wright's bringing us. I think the visual effects, obviously this is an Edgar Wright film, so the direction, the cinematography, there's some really great shots and transitions, like really clever visual sight gags he uses as kind of a joke if you're paying attention. The music, the needle drops, as always in an Edgar Wright film, are great. And, for a large portion of this movie, it was highly enjoyable. And I think within this film, there is a great movie here. But we'll move on to my mixed bag and really the negatives, which is this film is far too long. It's heavily bloated. And in some ways, it feels like two movies, maybe like a first part and a second part, meshed and forced together to tell two movies worth of story in one. And it drags, and there's extended sequences that really felt like they didn't belong. Big plot points that are set up are just completely pivoted away into something else. And I think the third act as a whole is largely a failure. And that's not because there aren't engaging action scenes. There's still humor in it, but a lot of things to me were pretty silly and preposterous. They didn't really necessarily make sense, like logically within the confines of the story. It felt to me like there was a lot of shortcuts taken to propel the plot forward versus having the plot driven from organic choices. Dumb choices are made a lot of times, not by Glenn Powell necessarily, but things that are just needed for the plot to succeed the way that Edgar Wright wanted it to. So it's a bit of a seesaw here for me, where there's so much to like, and it's so well made, and it's so well acted and shot, yet the story is bloated and runs on for far too long with this kind of Frankenstein's amalgamation, this smashing together of what felt like two movies. So, unfortunately, I find myself a little disappointed with the finished product. And my rating scale, if you're new to the channel, is in the description. If you're curious what my ratings mean, you can click the description and see, numerically versus the rating I'm going to give it. But to me, this is a watchable film. It's watchable because of the talent on display, the craftsmanship, the acting, the action sequences. There's a couple really high standouts. I think another positive is Michael Cera is an absolute scene stealer in this movie. But, it's capping off the non-spoiler part, my grade for this film is watchable. So with that, you've been warned. We are now entering spoiler territory. So 3, 2, 1, it's spoiler time. So right off the bat, I want to get into really the third act of this film, which was such a mess in many ways. And it just went on and on and on. And when I'm talking about, if you've been watching the whole review, this meshing of what felt like two movies, you have The Running Man, which is taking up essentially the first two acts of the film, and really just shoehorned into the back half of the third act is this whole like revolutionary take it to the man, bring down the corporations kind of finish. And yes, they set up, especially once when Glenn Powell gets with Michael Cera, you're I think they called him the instigator or the initiator, and the spark that, starts a revolution is the inference there. However, I think this film would have probably served itself better just sticking to the Running Man game and maybe telling this in two films. It really felt like a speed run of the Hunger Games trilogy told in one film, where if Katniss had the Hunger Games and taken down President Snow all in one movie, it would have all felt like too much. And, as good as Glenn Powell is, there's a lot of inconsistencies in his characterization where he's letting a bad guy live. Is it just because maybe I'm missing the point. He is resentful to authority, and anytime someone tells him to do something in this film, he tells him to kiss his ass twice. But having him be like, you need to kill this guy, he doesn't, and then 10 minutes later we see him kill the same guy he let go in an actually really cool set piece where Glenn Powell again, and he talked about this on his interview with Sean, whatever his name is, from Hot Ones, where I did this really big stunt where I'm flying off high distances and you couldn't really tell it was me, which is kind of funny. It reminds me of like the Burt Reynolds story of going over the waterfall and getting really hurt. And he asked the director, how'd it look? He goes, it looks like a dummy went off the waterfall. But Edgar Wright is such a good filmmaker. He has this really cool shot. So it's Glenn Powell when he's in the car after Michael Cera's been killed, and he does a head-on with the guy I was talking about that he let live, ends up killing him, but he flies out of the car over the railing of the bridge into the water below. And he does this front-facing shot where you see the water approaching Glenn from behind him, and you get to see his face as he falls into the water. And it's a great piece of stunt work. It's a great action set piece. And again, Glenn Powell is committed and willing to do that stuff for the entertainment of the audience. And I tip my hat to him. But the fact that 10 minutes earlier he let the guy live, there's just little inconsistencies there. The whole setup with Michael Cera telling him he needs to get to a bunker really bothered me because, once that happens, once he gets in the water, you start this journey where he's working himself towards this bunker. And he ends up being caught again. He gets on the run. He's on the highway and he hijacks a car with this like kind of upper class, party girl. And what really should have been a 5-minute bit with her involved becomes this like 20-minute long, 25-minute long sequence that just keeps going and going. And it's nothing against the actress or the performer. It becomes this really heavy-handed, like classist discussion of the rich and the poor. It's seen things we've seen done so many times throughout the history of film. It got to be a bit redundant, and it was way too heavy-handed. And really, I just don't get why, like, she just kind of appears and becomes like this huge focal point of the story. And we just go away from the bunker completely, like to the point where she becomes his hostage. That's what the network wants. He's doing it for the ratings, and they end up on like an airplane. And I'm like, how is he getting to the bunker? And it just never goes back to that. And you do get a pretty cool action sequence on the plane in the third act where they utilize the plane going up and down, creating this zero gravity as he's trying to kill these people that are trying to kill him. It's really a well done sequence. Lee Pace is unmasked at this point. He's like the main hunter. They're like basically the special forces people hunting the members of the Running Man. They're like the big bads, and he's the head. And he gets to choose some scenery. Lee Pace, of course, is Ronan from Guardians of the Galaxy, Ronan the Destroyer. And, that's all fine. But you get this kind of like reveal that, they killed his family. And we know that, if you're paying attention, they really didn't, because they've been altering video. They show this video, but, they've been altering video the whole movie. So, but what was interesting was how the film has like multiple endings at this point, because he ends up, turning down this offer to have his own show because he wants to stick it to Josh Brolin, the villain of the film. They shoot his plane down. You think he's died, and it's just kind of like, whoa, okay, that's how they're ending it. And then in comes the guy who helped him out in Boston towards the end of Act 1, who had this like conspiracy show he did where he starts discussing everything that happened in terms of conspiracy. Did he really die? Is his family really alive? And then we see his wife and his child shopping, and they're given a pair of socks, which was a big focal point of the first half of the movie, him holding on to his daughter's sock as like a reminder and motivation as he's trying to survive. And she sees him, and it's revealed he's alive. Like, okay, that's a cool ending. But then continues again to where they're like still doing the show. The corporate people, Domingo Coleman, who's like the host, quits, and Josh Brolin goes on stage, and there's this angry audience for some reason that this authoritarian, highly surveillance state allows to come in, and they just all have Molotov cocktails and they riot. And then Glenn Powell walks up onto the stage and shoots Josh Brolin in the head, and that's the film. And it was such a silly ending that I even looked at my girlfriend and I was like, well, that ending was pretty stupid, right? And she agreed. And it, it just got to be too much. I felt like he wrote himself into a corner in some way, or again, like he had to jam in part two because the studio or him didn't trust that maybe this movie would make enough money. And my theater was largely empty. I'm worried that this film might flop. I know I'm being anecdotal here, but I don't see this movie having like a 40, $50 million weekend. Hopefully it does, just because it's nice to have somewhat original IP. You know, it's an adaptation of a King novel and a remake of a Schwarzenegger film, but you still like to see directors of this talent given projects like this. So, but, you know, after that really awesome first half, culminating in probably the highlight of the film, which is this action set piece with Michael Cera in a house, and it's just vintage Edgar Wright. You have music playing, it's high energy, this frenetic pacing with great bits of humor, and Michael Cera just killing it, and you know, some really funny moments. And then from there, it just kind of flatlines, and pun fully intended, forgive me, but it just, the Running Man runs out of steam. So there's probably some other things I could maybe touch on, but I feel largely disappointed. I saw it in IMAX. I don't necessarily think it's worth seeing in IMAX, though. If you're a fan of the lead actor, you're a fan of the director, you want to support film, go see it in theater. I just don't think you have to see it in IMAX because it's really not an IMAX format. That not one point, like in layman's term, was the whole screen, the whole IMAX screen full. So yeah, I mean, I find myself disappointed. I still had a fun time for the most part of the movie, but it kept going. This was a great movie in if it had been 110 minutes instead of 133 minutes, even 100 minutes maybe, and maybe just tell a part two. So I don't know. The length hinders future rewatchability. I could see myself watching this another time, maybe 3 times over the next few years just to get a full feel of it. But honestly, this might be a movie I just watch one more time. It's just, you know, it's watchable. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. It didn't meet the lofty expectations I had for it. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. What did you think of the movie? Did you love it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you meh? I haven't seen any reviews for this. I don't know if I'm an anomaly or in the majority, but you know, largely disappointed, but still enjoyed it. Just way too long, way too bloated, and pretty convoluted third act. Really didn't make a lot of sense. So that's my review, guys. Give me a like if you enjoyed the review. If you're new to the channel, you like my review, you want to subscribe, ring the bell, I'd sure appreciate it. Trying to grow any way I can, but that's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I appreciate you tuning in as always. And this is Jake Margo with Margo Watches Movies. We'll see you next time.